Hey guys, so today we're going to start talking about foodborne illnesses, also known as food poisoning. So, this is the type of stuff that some of you guys may have experienced before. Some of you guys, I hope, will never experience it because it is awful. Each person's going to experience it differently because, number one, all of our bodies are different. And then also, you may experience food poisoning differently than somebody else because you guys may actually have two different types of foodborne illnesses. So we're going to take a look at three main ones today, and then your assignment will be to take a look at a fourth one, but we'll get to that here in a little bit. So first and foremost, foodborne illnesses symptoms often resemble the flu. So some people will mistake it as they've had the flu for a few days, they felt crummy. The only thing is, though, typically, if it's not like a extreme severe case that puts you in the hospital, which has happened before, this is more of like it comes on rather quickly, typically within either a few hours to 24 hours of when you ate the contaminated food. And then it hopefully will only take a couple of days for it to kind of cycle through, which is not fun. And then it will end. So hopefully you only experience this for about 2 or 3 days max, and then a day or two to regain all your strength back. Whereas the flu itself can take you out for a couple of weeks. So just all the symptoms, people kind of quickly assume that it's a flu, and really they might have actually gotten food poisoning. So most of the time, a healthy person's immune system will get rid of the bacteria on its own. We have all types of bacteria that we need for our bodies. We have some in our stomachs and throughout our digestive tract that kind of helps break the food down. So it does a really good job trying to kick things out anyway. Sometimes, though, there's just too much bacteria, bad bacteria, and our bodies just cannot handle it. So those who are most at risk to get a foodborne illness and experience the symptoms are going to be pregnant women, young children, because their immune systems are not, like, they're still relatively young and hasn't really built up a lot of immunities to this type things. Older adults, just because their immune system is just not what it used to be. And then those who have some type of compromised immune disorder. So something where it's just not functioning the way that it should. So they tend to get sick longer and more often, which is other things. And that would include foodborne illnesses as well. So one of the ones that we're going to look at is called E. coli, also known as mad cow disease. Its symptoms are severe bloody diarrhea, stomach cramps, and we also know, too, there have been documented cases that it can be fatal. So there have been, like I said, known cases for that. Where does it come from? Raw or improperly cooked beef, including beef products. Essentially, anything that comes from the cow that is infected with E. coli is what could make you sick. So that it also includes unpasteurized milk and juice. And it can also include fruits and vegetables, and that is because those could have been treated with cow manure. And like I said, if it comes from the cow and the cow is highly contaminated, then anything that comes from the cow, including its droppings that are later used for fertilizer and manure, can contaminate those fruits and vegetables as well. So comes from the actual beef itself. It can come from milk and juice because the juice will have the actual fruits and vegetables in it. And then any produce that you could potentially eat raw that has been treated with cow manure from an infected cow. So this is always why it's important to make sure that you wash your fruits and vegetables off. So how can we prevent it? Cook food to your proper temperatures. Most beef products need to be cooked to an internal temperature of 165 or above. Anybody who gets their steaks or beef or things like that cooked to order, meaning that you like it medium rare or just medium with a little like pink in the middle, do know that unless you say you want it well done, you run a much higher risk of contracting E. coli because we are purposely telling them not to cook it all the way through. I don't know why we've ever decided that it's okay to partially cook it, even though the science tells us it's not, but we still do. And trust me, I am a medium rare type steak person, so I take the risk every time. You should also be using pasteurized milk. It is illegal in the U.S. to sell or purchase milk that has not gone through the pasteurization process, which is essentially in a slower manner, we heat it up to high temperatures to kill off the bacteria, but yet it doesn't cook the milk and like curdle it and things like that. And then we drop it back down. So we're killing the bacteria while not compromising the structure of milk. Try to avoid cross-contamination and then make sure you wash all produce. So for salmonella, that's mostly going to be coming from your domesticated bird products, your poultry products that could include turkey, chicken, and then anything that comes from them as well. So eggs and things like that. Symptoms are going to be nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, cramps, fever. Again, these are probably the most closely related to the flu. It comes from raw and improperly cooked poultry products, any foods contaminated by raw eggs, and then potentially peanut butter. Now, peanut butter is kind of weird because it's not like it has raw eggs in it or it has no ingredients that uses raw eggs. Just to keep in mind that the theory behind this is that years and years and years ago, there's a big recall on a certain brand of peanut butter. And what through investigations, they found out that essentially the factory in which the peanut butter was being made and produced and cycled through had like a hole in the rafters and the roofing, something like that. But basically, pigeons were getting in. And what happens is pigeons go to the bathroom wherever they see fit, and that would be over the machinery. So you have these large vats of all these ingredients that are going through the processing, and what happens is the pigeon droppings would end up in these large vats, which can cross-contaminated it. Pigeons had salmonella, and so that's how people were getting sick. That is one of the investigations, and there might be other ways too that it was done that way, but that was the largest, most supported theory of how people were getting salmonella from peanut butter. So how do we prevent salmonella? Cook food to the proper temperatures. Again, chicken's going to be, I believe, 155 to 165. It's going to be one of those in there. I can't remember the exact top of my head. Chicken is one where you don't cook to order. It should absolutely be cooked all the way through. If there's any pink in the middle, you need to send it back, or you need to cook it longer if you're cooking it at home. We also know to not eat raw eggs or uncooked products that contain raw eggs. That includes cookie dough. I know probably 99% of us have eaten raw cookie dough. We've taken the risk. Do know it's a risk every time. You can make cookie dough without using raw eggs, and then you can eat that raw and you'll be fine. So just take a look at it. There's raw eggs in there. You probably shouldn't chance it. And then again, avoid cross-contamination. So if you're cooking like a stir fry and you've got raw chicken and raw vegetables, you either need to cut your vegetables first on the cutting board and then go throw them on the stove and cook those down and then cut your chicken, or you need to have two separate cutting boards, one for meat, one for non-meat products, and that'll help avoid cross-contamination with all of your meats and your like veggies. The last one we're going to take a look at is botulism. Botulism is from canned foods in jars and things like that. So its symptoms is double and blurred vision. This is kind of like the weirdest one out of the three of these that we're talking about, because botulism itself is actually, it's a toxin, it's a paralytic, like nerve toxin. So it will actually start to paralyze some of your like nerve cells and stuff like that, and your muscles and everything, which is basically all of your internal organs or some type of muscle. So it's going to affect us differently. So with the there's also slurred speech, difficulty swallowing or dry mouth, muscle weakness or paralysis, and then also, again, documented cases in which it has been fatal. The sources come from improperly canned foods, any type of cans that are leaking or they're bulging, and then any unsealed jars or cans, or jars that were not sealed properly. If you guys have ever watched the canning process, people who like can their own fruit and things like that, there is science behind it. It's not just here's a bunch of vegetables or a bunch of fruit that we're going to put in a can or a jar, and we're going to twist on the lid and call it a day. No, there's a science, there's a pressuring process and everything behind it, just to make sure it's done properly and make sure that no bacteria gets in there, so it ruins it. How do we prevent it? Do not eat from improperly sealed containers. Do not use dented or bulging cans. And then make sure seals are not broken prior to buying. So typically when you guys are buying like salsa and you guys go to twist it open for the first time, you guys should hear that lid pop. If the lid hasn't popped, then it's either already been opened once or it was never properly sealed in the first place. So double check those. Here are some pictures of what botulism looks like. This is one outside. You can tell from the dust on the top of this picture that this has actually been in someone's cabinet for a very long time. But there has been some weak point in there. The buildup happened and basically it exploded out the side. If you look at these two right here, there's actually so much of a buildup that it's actually pushed the metal up. This one does not have any weak points to where it actually starts to come out. However, if you were to puncture that, there definitely be a very nasty smell to it and a very kind of weird goo coming out of it. bacteria loves sugar. It's a great source for it. Bacteria is actually kind of like people, like we have to have food and oxygen and all that. And somehow oxygen has gotten in these cans at some point, which is why it was able to continue to grow. So sugar is what's going to keep it going. It gives it energy. This one over here has actually started to leak. And so you do have a weak point right there. It's actually oozing out a little bit. It's oozed out over here on the sides. Definitely don't eat it. And if you guys notice too, this has pear halves. So even though there's no sugar added, pears themselves, fruit is higher in simple sugars. So that's what it's basically kind of living off of. Same thing over here. This is a peach, like a peach pie filling. So again, it's a lot of peaches and a lot of simple syrup and stuff like that. So it's a lot for it to eat. So here's your guys' assignment. Again, I've added it to the end of your notes because I figured it'd be a little bit more user-friendly for you guys. But what you're going to do is you're going to use the internet to create a wanted poster for a foodborne illness. There's a list on the next slide. I want you to choose one from that list, okay? Information gathered has got to be in your own words and from reputable sources. So it should not be from Wikipedia or from people's blogs and their own experiences. You should use credible websites, the ones that end in .gov, .edu, or like .Missouri, other states, whatever, that's fine. Another great one to use would be the CDC. WebMD would be an okay one to use as well. You guys can find all your information on those websites. Use the last slide of this to create your wanted poster. So here's the list. Choose one of them, and then that will be one that you'll actually do the rest of this on. So the requirements, you need to have the name. You need to have 2 images. It can be of what the pathogen actually looks like, or it can be example of food source that the pathogen is most likely to be found on. You could do both. You could do 2 of one. Or 1 of each, whatever works. You just need to make sure that you have 2 images. A brief description of the pathogen in your own words. And then you also need the 4 last known locations. Basically, I'm asking you where would you commonly find this foodborne illness? Like what types of foods? And then how to avoid coming into contact with it. As a disclaimer, writing just avoid it or cook food is not acceptable. So if you're going to say something like cook food, then you need to add specific temperature. So it could be cook food to an internal temperature of 160 and above, whatever it is, okay? It needs to be specific. I've also given you an example too of one, again, like this person right down here, they bullet pointed everything. That is perfect. I want the same thing. You're not writing a paper. You're not writing paragraphs upon paragraphs. I want short and sweet and to the point. And then last one right here. Here's your template I've given you. You don't have to use this template. Just use this slide. So if you don't like this template, go through and delete those boxes off. So you can actually pathogen name, just take that out and write whichever one you're going to write. Okay, so if you're going to do norovirus, do norovirus. Okay, and then answer the questions there. Pictures don't have to be big. Just put 2 of them right there. Again, if you don't like this layout, you can change it, move the boxes around. Just make sure that the actual assignment ends up at the end of this slide. So if you have any questions, you guys know to email me.